All right, folks. Hello. I'm JSat. I've been playing Vermintide for 2015, 2016. Don't make me do math in public. I do it for a living, so I won't do it as my hobby. I'm really glad everyone's here. The festival has been absolutely awesome. So before anything else, I'd really like to thank Xan and Ishka for all the behind-the-scenes work and on-cam work they've been doing to put this together. I have just a small suspicion of how much work they put into this, and it's a lot. So make sure you thank them again for all the work they've done. And I'd also really like to thank Fatshark.Mats, hello,
Hi up.
for coming to share his insights into Vermintide, stepping away from the family life for an hour or two, whatever the heck, until we get exhausted.
Yeah. It's nighttime here. Like I just got the kids to bed, so it's gonna
Mats,
be fine.
would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us about your history at Fatshark a little bit and what you do there.
Yeah. Sure. So hi everyone. I'm Mats. I'm sitting here in Stockholm, Sweden. It's nighttime. It's 10 o'clock in the evening, and I'm the game designer and the kind of team captain, or uh, I don't know what it's like, scrum master, team captain, game designer, producer. Basically, I head up the combat team. We make all the weapons, we make all the enemies, we make all of the in-game stuff for Vermintide 1, Vermintide 2. So my history at Fatshark basically started with me returning from parental leave. I think I came to Fatshark as a consultant like 6 months into the production. There was a tiny bit of a prototype, which was, kind of nice. And I know some of the guys there. They're basically like, "Hi, great, you're here. We don't have any game designers on board yet. Can you just like fix first-person melee?" And I'm like, "Sure. Do you have any kind of references from other games that you want to like?" No, there ain't no good ones. We have Skyrim. And I'm like, Skyrim sucks. We probably need to do something here. And then we just kind of went to work. I think like for the first 6 months, I was pretty much given like just a carte blanche to do whatever I wanted, and then we started forming up a combat team. Coders were starting to get kind of angry at who is up in our code changing stuff so it doesn't make any sense, and I'm like, but it's fun. It's for fun. It doesn't have to work. It's for fun. So yeah, that's kind of how I started. Now I've been at Fatshark for 6 years, I think. I don't know. Time flies when you're getting
That's
old.
about right. It might be a little longer than that. Release was
Yeah,
what,
it might
December
be.
15?
Yeah. I don't know. It's all a blur. I mean, basically, I decided to stay at Fatshark. I had this little consultancy crew with like 3 coders and me as a designer that we had been jumping around building studios around the Stockholm area. And all of us from the kind of AAA studio, we've been at Avalanche and Dice and stuff before. And I just kind of, after making Vermintide, which was kind of my dream game because I'm a Warhammer fantasy nerd and I've been thinking about like first-person melee stuff since I went to uni to study game studies and shit. I pretty much jumped ship and said I'm gonna stay instead. And then I stayed, and I've been doing combat stuff at Fatshark ever since.
All right. So you've been thinking about first person melee for a long time,
Yep.
and you had that 6 months at the beginning to just kind of wrap your head around the idea. Finally, you have a chance to do a first person melee. What were
Yeah.
the games that you were going through in your head that did things that were cool, that influenced you?
I think honestly, I mean, I have some weird reference for that because we went through most of the like melee games and first-person melee games, and none of them had the meatiness or the kind of gameplay behind it. Like looking at the prototype we had at the time, or the alpha, it felt meaty. It felt good. We had like the 200 hammer in, and we could hit a Clanrat in the face, and he would ragdoll. But didn't have any of the other stuff. We didn't have the staggers. We didn't have the slot system. We didn't have the positioning. So it was basically a whack-a-mole headshot simulator at that point, which you can imagine doesn't really work where you have 35 moles running at you and you have to hit every single one in the head. So just looking at getting the first person feeling in, I like. There's not a lot of good references out there. The closest thing you're gonna get is single player games. You're gonna look at like fighter games, basically what they do with the preamble, with the kind of cancellation stuff going in the action handling, and just kind of the impact feel of things. And that goes beyond just having a nice ragdoll, right? You want to have the slowdown and then the oomph of the impact. like the last game I worked on before coming to I did a stint as a producer. Previous, I was at Avalanche, so I worked together with Corey Barlog, the God of War guy, working a lot on the kind of melee combat and vehicle combat for the Mad Max game. So I had all of those ideas in my mind as well, but like trying to get that to work in a multiplayer peer-to-peer session where you can't really slow down time, we instead had to reinvent a bunch of stuff, basically slowing down movement, getting those movement curves up and running so we actually feel the impact of stuff, doing a fake kind of time control thing, combined with just building all of the mechanics, the slot system, the cleave system, the staggers, the control, the attack intensities, just to kind of give you that playground where you actually can use this. Because it's a big difference between like making you hit one rat feel good and making it interesting to hit 75 rats for hours on end together with 3 friends, right?
So one of the systems that jumps out at me as a
Yep.
really interesting system that makes the game feel good, that scales to 50 rats, is the slots system.
Yep.
Was that something you guys cooked up that hadn't really been done in games before?
I don't know. I mean, most games have some kind of positioning control, but I mean, like when we approached the slot system, me and one of the coders, Peter, one of the guys at Fatshark, we just sat down, and I said, I want to have this thing where we can lock shields. Like we want to reinforce the co-play. We need the players to have this. I mean, we don't need to like scream it at their face, but there should be this intuitive kind of let's lock together as a team and it should control the tide, because we're going to have so many enemies. We can't make the individual fights. We can't make this into a like duelist. I'm going to fight this clan rat for 30 seconds while you combat that storm vermin for 2.5 minutes. That's off the table. So we need to make it more of a like, controlling the Vermintide. So we sat down and I said, I want to have a system where we have the slots surrounding the player that should provide control. It should support our kind of lines manning, build corpse wall gameplay where we want the rats to actually just stand in front of you waiting to get hit. You can hit and stun all of them and then cut them down. But if you interlock that system, we should dynamically remove or shut down the slots and be able to dynamically reposition them based on the kind of topology of the game space in order to allow you to have discrete control of the battlefield kind of thing. And it worked kind of okay to begin with, but there's been a lot of tweakage and changes and just like following the movement of the players because it's such a dynamic environment. If we had that, like, well, everyone go and stand here and then you're locked in place, it works really nice. But since you're constantly moving and dodging and you need to handle a lot of information and continuously kind of adjust the position data of the minions or the enemies that you're throwing at people to create that gameplay loop.
All right, Mats,
Yeah.
I'm going to resist the urge to go down this rabbit hole. Bring us
Yeah.
back up for a moment. I had
Okay,
a silly question for you.
Okay, cool.
Going back to taking inspiration from various sources, was
Yep.
there any inspiration that you took from kind of an unlikely source that made its way all the way into the final product?
Oh, I don't know, dude. Like, I'm not. I think the two weirdest things, and they're not that weird. There's this old Spanish game called what's it called? It's a hack and slash like barbarian game. Not Deliverance. It's I can look it up, but it's basically you run around and just cut people apart and have a combo system and stuff. It came out in '97 sometime. It's not Deliverance. It's something similar sounding.
That's like
I used to
Hexen
play the
time frame.
yeah. Perhaps it was later. But anyway, I used to play the shit out of that, and it basically had all of the dismemberments and all of the like you can do the dodge cut. You had the like super combo based combat, third person. So a lot of the dismemberments and just like the gratuitous violence stuff actually came from there. And then like I'm way more of a role player board game like miniatures kind of nerd. So a lot of like we had these silly rules initially where it's like, well, a clan rat is obviously one wound. We cannot change that. We have to have them at one wound. So we can only have one hit point value. And I think we stuck with that for quite a while. And it kind of drove the simplicity of a lot of the damage interactions because we never went to like 100 hit points or 2,000 hit points or anything, because we basically kept it at we need to have the system run with you. If you hit a guy, you do 1 wound of damage, and that's it. Like, because in the tabletop it's 1 wound. Like, you can't have half a wound. You either do wounds or you don't. So there was a lot of like silly stuff like that just goes with the Warhammer brand that we tried to get to work early, but like we cut them away and got realistic eventually.
So,
Severance, yeah, Severance. Chat has it right.
okay.
Severance, Blade of something. Anyway,
So you missed the part of the development where they went to a bar and said, "You know what would be great? Let's make a Left 4 Dead style melee game in the Warhammer
yeah,
universe." So let's
yeah,
let's fast forward past the bar scene where the idea is pitched, and
yeah.
somehow they get the
No,
Warhammer
but
folks
I
to.
know the story, and it's a good story if you want to hear it, though.
We can fast forward through it if you'd like, or you can
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
ramp. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. Because I mean, because it was one of the things that kind of caught me when I came to Fatshark, because they were basically like, because I asked them like, why are you making this game? It sounds really hard. It's like you're taking all of the complicated parts of game development, like first person and co-op and peer-to-peer solutions, and trying to make a game out of it. It's gonna be really, really tricky. And they're like, no, but like Anders, the game director, he's a really big Warhammer fan, and the code guys are a really big Left 4 Dead fan. So they actually emailed like customer service at Games Workshop, Anders, because they didn't have a contact at Games Workshop at the time, and just asked, "Hi, I'm not trying to refund any of your products, but we have like a production budget and thought we'd make a Warhammer game. So like, can we talk to someone on your end?" And that's kind of where the ball got rolling. Um,
So you come in. They've been tinkering with something. You're coming in from
yep.
the action team. I'm assuming early in this process there was a meeting or a series of meetings where you guys just said, what are like the big design pillars we need to put in place to make
Yep.
this Left 4 Dead melee
Yep.
Warhammer game work? What were those pillars? Did they evolve?
Um,
Did they work?
I mean, I think it was basically those two. There was certainly more details, but I'm shit at documentation and remembering stuff. But I mean, the core things that we really wanted to focus on was we need this to be a co-op game. Like, all of the decisions we make, it should be catered around co-op. We should always make design decisions and make balances and make like the complexity of gameplay loop in mind of there's 4 players, and you need to have time and mental space left over to actually consider your teammates. It's why we tried to keep the specials kind of simple. Like, we've done tons of prototypes where we make them super complicated, and you have gutter runners who run around with throwing knives and do weird combos, and then you're starting to go over into that duelist thing where JSAT is going to be stuck in a corner fighting one single enemy for 7 minutes, but then you won't have time to deal with the rest of the team, right? So a lot of those like overarching things have always been measured against that, and the other main core pillar is pretty much Warhammer. We need to grab the old world Warhammer and make that realized in a truthful and honest and like, I wouldn't say realistic, because Warhammer is in no way, shape, or form realistic. But you know that thing when you grew up with it and you played role playing games and you played the tabletop and it's kind of your world, and you want to just get that feeling across, because there's so many games and there's so many reincarnations of this that are like outright like money grabs, or just kind of they don't have the best rumor of having the most high quality product sometimes, and we just wanted to make a really 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 nice like our version of making Warhammer come alive. uh, so a lot of details was down to that as well, where it's like now but like we had design discussions early on, like, let's do scrolls or something, let's just pick up scrolls and you can throw fireballs, that's cool, every game like it solves a thing. And like, there's a dwarf wouldn't touch that, and like the the witch hunter captain wouldn't touch that either. She, like, there's no way we can do that. And then the non-Warhammer lore fans part of the design team goes like, dudes, we can't do anything in this game because of the lore. And we're like, yes, that is true, it is very 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 correct, we need to consider all of those things. Yeah, sorry for rambling, like, it's pretty much what I do.
So it sounds like you answered my next question, which was pretty interesting. So I definitely picked up on, after much play, what you're talking
Yeah,
about, the individual combat interactions being relatively simplistic, because I
yeah,
think
yeah.
of it as bandwidth. I think of it as
Yeah.
bandwidth all the time. So the Storm
Yeah.
Vermin takes more bandwidth than a Clan
Yep.
Rat
Yep.
because of the way his hitbox check works. You have to think more
Yeah.
about your positioning, and it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
So, and, you know what? I'm not going to go this way because I'm about to do V2 stuff. Holding on.
No,
Okay.
not V2. Indeed, V1. We had the same simple formula. It's basically how many clan rats per player, and then we would throw a elite, a storm vermin in. That's going to be one player, right? And if we throw a rat ogre, that's 4 players. So we had this calculation of how many things and how fast can the players kill them. So that is what the spacing needs to spawn to keep everyone engaged, kind of thing. Uh, yep.
Yes.
Let's. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So, combat stuff. We've breezed through a number of elements. One of the elements that jumped out at me that I haven't seen in other games is the dodge mechanic. It
Yep.
functions somewhat like a roll, but it doesn't interrupt any of your actions, and it's
No.
nearly a free resource that it regenerates quickly. What was
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of the origin of that? Did you play with other things? Did stamina initially control that too? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So initially, I think dodge was one of the last things we added. Like if you go from the very rough, like alpha prototype thing that we had, as we started to just get new feature sets in, we talked about the dodge. I did an early test of it. And then after we got the core kind of, you have the tank gameplay and you have the kind of lines manning and the smiting and everything that you do. Where we had pretty much the core up and running, but we felt that we missed that profile, that play style, right? So we started to look at Carillion and we started talking about the different gestalts, which is a fancy word for saying roles or just play styles. And in order to get to that, like ninja fencer, I'm an elf, I just dodge around and do stuff, we needed to add that thing. So the implementation of the dodge came a lot more from a very specific realization of a feeling of gameplay where you want to be this nimble, agile kind of. I should be able to dodge dance around, cutting hamstrings and stabbing people in the throat rather than be something that's a like integrated combat thing. And I think that's why we kept the whole flow of I want to be able to go dodge and cut at the same time, because otherwise if we interrupt actions, it becomes way more of a slow paced kind of I'm an old man with a big sword kind of fight style. And that's too much Kruber, like he's not the ninja fencer. So we kind of focus, and I think we do that with a lot of the features that we implement, or when I talk about it, like I have this approach where I say like we shouldn't have any features in the game that's not directly linked to a playstyle, a gestalt, right? And we shouldn't have any gestalts in the game that doesn't have feature support, because then it's gonna feel shitty. It's just that everyone should be able to fluently kind of flow between the different gameplay styles or roles or gestalts if you want to play it. So we give the dodge to everyone. We just make it a shitty dodge. If you're a dwarf with a shield, it still has a usability, but you can't use it as. I mean, you're not gonna dodge around unless you're a slayer where we can do some weird shit. But I mean, we can control it, and I think that contrast where everyone has the same tools, but if you push with a shield, it's a completely different thing than pushing with dual daggers. And the same thing goes for dodge, because you have it across the board, so people can kind of appreciate their teammates. If we lock those features into the different careers, we had that thought for a moment, you lose that team play respect and like moment to shine aspect of, oh my god, the elf can really dodge dance around. I can dodge, but I can't dodge like that kind of feeling that I think builds the team in a way. We did try some stamina stuff. We did try to time cap it in a way. In the end, I just kind of threw together the diminishing returns aspect of it. We did some tries to control that, but I mean, at the end of the day, it kind of broke the flow to a large degree. As soon as you start controlling people's what's it called, freedom anyway, uh, it tends to break the flow of the combat for you as a player, and I'm very very about doing that for balance reasons. But yeah.
Okay. So, can I take you back to a particular set of design decisions that happened after initial release? Almost
Yep.
a year after. The patch I'm
Yep.
thinking of is patch 1.5, the mobility patch.
Yep.
Were you integral in the decisions that led to that?
Yeah, I was around there doing that thing.
So for folks at home that don't remember patch numbers, I'm sure no one remembers V1 patch numbers anymore. But this was this patch December, a year after the game was released, where one-handers got buffs and non-elf one-hander dodges got much closer to elf dodging. And now suddenly mobility is a thing that's available to every character, really, for the first time. So it was a marked change in the balance of the game, and it also kind of coincided with players just getting better at the game, better at movement mechanics, understanding them at a deeper level. And ever since then, I think we've seen an escalation in player mobility.
Yeah.
Has that been a design challenge? I'm sure it has. And I know some of the things you've done in V2, but how do you feel about player mobility? And has that feeling changed over time?
I think it's from a if work hat goes on, it's definitely a challenge because it's basically the balance between how much of a like solo experience and how much of a team play experience are we talking about here. I mean, at the extremes here, you have that if everyone's on Ninja Fencer and can just dodge around, you're getting to that point where there's 4 players doing the exact same thing, but we spawn enough enemies that you need to be 4 to be able to kill them all, as opposed to there's a tank and there's a ranged elite hunter and there's someone ninja fencing around doing other things, and we basically increase the reliance on the teammates by forcing you into certain roles depending on like gear checks and loadout choices and stuff. I think there's always going to be that debate in a design team, and we've surely had it, where you have like the crowd pleasing option is basically if everyone can dodge and run around and just kill everything with cool strikes and feel super powerful all the time, that's going to be awesome for every single player. And I tend to go into the grumpy old man corner of going like, what I don't think gratuitous like just feel good gameplay is worth everything. You need to have some kind of balance in between. I sit and play this game specifically when working on Vermintide. I sit for 8 hours every day, running through the combat level, playing the game. There's a natural gravity towards you building that into an enjoyable experience for you yourself, because otherwise, I mean, you're gonna have to churn through the levels. So I think that the lore of making everything highly mobile and highly lethal and capable of clearing out any challenge we throw at you on your own is always there, just from natural reasons. Like if I'm running around with a shield and a hammer, which is supposed to be this super tanky, I'm gonna do the foundation of the team and set stuff up and just control the horde. I'm not going to be able to kill the storm vermin super effectively. I'm not going to be able to dodge dance around or kite away and do stuff. I need a team to back me out. But if you're sitting there as a lonely designer in the periods between going to the like team test, it's really easy for you to go like, I'm just going to increase the dodge distance a bit. It's going to like, I'm just going to increase the movement speed a bit. I'm just going to increase the armor damage a bit. So yeah, I mean, it's been a continuous discussion back and forth, and it's about that, like how much of a power experience do we want to give versus how much of a team experience do we want to give. I think 1.5 was a move into the
Power
everyone
fantasy.
gets mobility, power fantasy. It's going to be so much more fun for everyone. Definitely. I'm not saying it's a bad move. Like it's a crowd pleaser. It's basically like everyone gets free candy, woo, and then like free candy is fucking awesome.
So there's a balance then. If you
Yeah.
up the mobility, suddenly you can have this point where you're not dependent on each other.
Yep.
There's not interdependence. So then you have to up the challenge to force them to start playing together again, and then you can have this escalation in power levels on both sides, and then we get V2.
Yeah, kind of. Or you have to do new enemies to challenge people, or through new stuff. And so, I mean, basically, if you want to talk about the pure power fantasy, I mean, we could go that route as well, where we start removing skill as well, where it's basically just you just walk around and click and press space, and then everything dies. That's going to be a super powerful experience for people who like to win. Like if you come home from a rough day at work and you just want to kill shit, it's an excellent experience. The problem is we're losing the reliance on flow and mastery and learning, and that like mental, I am now no kung fu because I can just handle whatever situation the game throws at you, because you never learned that. And the only thing we have left are basically hats and new adventures with fancy explosions.
Right.
And hats and fancy explosions, it takes time and it costs money, and it's easily a slippery slope where you end up just people will see through the illusion eventually and go like, but this is just more of the same. It's pretty much the same thing. And I don't know. I might be overly hesitant about stuff like that, but I think at its core, providing a clear-cut gameplay that you actually can master and feel that zen, the lean back where you realize that, oh my god, my breathing has slowed down and my heart rate is like down, and I'm going like, yes, of course, I know this. I'm just going through that is, I think, what creates stickiness in games and what makes it a really good game.
So that mastery
Kinda.
feeling where you cleared a horde, you have a rough sense of the horde timer, you know where you are, you know the geometry, you know where the books are, you know where you're going next, and you know your buddies do too. That feeling of flow that comes with it. Yes.
And you just headshotted a stormworm over to your left with a little flick shot because you sensed that he needed the help. Yeah.
All right, let me take you in a bit of a different direction. So I think at this point, that Vermintide's got some Byzantine level depth and complexity at some points. Can we agree on this? Like, I'm telling you, it is April 2021, and I finally understand how the item spawning system works in Vermintide 1. The sectioning and such. There is some unexpected complexity from quarters that you would expect to be somewhat trivial. Every item spawner can spawn certain types, and it just rolls a die and picks one, or empty. No, that's not how it works at all. It's got 5 other levels of complexity that there's no need to discuss now, right? So at some point, you guys have to ask yourself something along the lines of, there is a tension between what feels good and solves the design problems and what's explainable. How do we resolve this tension? Which side do we err on? Do we have a philosophy at this point at Fatshark for this question? And for you personally, Mats?
Well, I think that has been a very natural kind of process within Fatshark. There's always been this, like, of course we want to have a game that's easily explainable to people. But like when we started the project, as I said, we didn't have a lot of designers on the project to get like Fatshark historically has been a very kind of code-driven. Everyone, I don't know if it's a Swedish thing or if it's a Fatshark thing, but like we're super agile or whatever you want to call it. Everyone just helps out. So the first hurdle to get over is to find the fun, right? So we have this game, we have a bunch of Skaven, we have a bunch of Warhammer lore, and we have a 200 hammer, we have a sword, and we have a bow, right? And we need to figure out how is this fun to play for players. So I think for Vermintide 1 specifically, it's a series of fortunate or unfortunate event, depending on which side of who is responsible for the UX experience of this you're on, that along comes Mats and a bunch of coders eventually just going, let's add a dodge, and it's going to have a diminishing return thing that goes like this. And then you're going to have a hitmass system, but the hitmass system is going to take targets into account because the linesman actually needs the second and third target to have a very specific stagger level. Otherwise, they're going to fall over and you can't hit them on the return blow. And you also want to have a very subtle control over the damage output, because if you kill the guys in the wrong order, it's going to feel off. Like if you get doff, and then all 3 fall over, that's a way worse experience than if you have the first cut, the second cut kills the first guy you hit with the first cut, and then the last cut cuts the head of the 2 last remaining standing things. So it's the detailed work of just making that. Yeah, here's my cat as well. Say hi. So, I mean, we just went ham with stuff like that and built up the core gameplay based around it. And then came the moment of truth when we were going to go like, so we need to present the weapons to players. Should we go through the damage code? And everyone's like, let's not talk about damage code, because I mean it's super complex. We made a couple of passes on it, and we definitely made some. We had some talks about, do we need to refactor this? Can we remove some of this complexity without losing the gameplay feeling of it? And pretty much no. So at the end of the day, it came down to time for Vermintide 1 pretty much, because I mean we're a small crew at that point. There's not a lot of people on it, and the decision was pretty much made that let's present the weapons. Let's try to do some keywording or something on them. and then we leave something for the community hackers to basically dig around in, because we assume it's going to build quite a strong knit community of like private investigators sit around going, oh my god, this is a treasure trove of weird shit that I need to figure out. And I think that approach kind of worked out. I've been following your progress with a happy smile during the first year of Vermintide, when like you have the Reddit post where like, they actually changed the return value of the thing based on the other thing. I'm like, yes, you found that little secret. Wait until you figure out the next part of it. Right?
Okay, hold on.
So,
Just
yeah.
time out. So just to be clear, you're claiming that we'd figure it out on our own. Why would you deny us the pleasure? Because you sound like an old school 70s, 60s father.
Yeah, kind of.
It'll
Kind
toughen
of
you up.
weird. Yeah, it'll toughen up. I mean,
But wait, are you being
I think
quite serious? Are you joking? Are you being quite serious?
no, I'm being quite serious. We talked about like we could probably go and try to explain everything to people. I know. I mean, I don't think it's an official Fatshark thing. It's my thing where I've said in meetings like, there's definitely going to be a part of the community that want to dig into this sort of thing and figure it out. Like we could try to, in the official interface for the inventory stuff for Vermintide 1, to just go in and do a 3-layered presentation of every breakdown of any target and any armor class based on hit zone and stuff like that. But it's going to be an overcomplicated mess. It's going to scare people away. Like, I don't think you need to know that stuff in order to enjoy the game. I think you need to know that stuff in order to min-max your solo runs or play the modded content. But you can definitely go in and play a legend run looking at the baseline core product without knowing the exact breakdown of the dynamics of your weapon, because you're going to feel it. You're going to know what you need to do, kind of thing. I think we did some early. I know I put together some spreadsheets. I know I fed some people some data and just been like, yeah, sure, you should look this, and this is why we did stuff. But we've never gone out in force and said, welcome to Fatshark's weird damage mechanic school. We're gonna leave that up to guys like you instead.
Okay. Right turn.
Yeah.
Well, I process this silently on my side. So at any time you're doing something creative, you're going to
Yep.
end up attached to some ideas that eventually you have
Yeah.
to let go.
Yep.
Do you have some design decisions that you had to make, ended up making in Vermintide that you were really reluctant to make, that you could tell us a bit about?
Not really that comes to mind, but my mind is, or everything is a jumble. I think I've been in the luxurious position of having quite free hands building stuff. I mean, I think the previous discussion is a show of that. Like in any normal AAA production, you would have a very angry producer come scream at you and say, "Make it more simple." You can't just go, "But it's special and it works," and not have your way. I mean, I know I mean, to me, I if we want to talk about the professional role, because I get asked that quite a lot at work and stuff, where it's like, but what do you want to do, Mats? Is this your favorite thing? I'm like, no, I just want to be told a problem and then be useful. Like, I'm not the guy, I'm not the designer who goes like, I have a game, I want to make a beautiful like unicorns moon based MMO or something. Like, I'm the guy you go with a problem and say, we want to do first person melee in a 4-player thing. And that really kind of gets me going. So the only thing I have that I've always wanted to do is orcs, because I'm an orc player I played orcs for 25 years. It's pretty much the only thing I've been griping on every single design mission meeting that we've had. When we're doing orcs, we can do orcs. We can do orcs. So it's kind of a pun at this point and a joke around the studio. And people usually say like, we're not doing orcs before I have to say that we're doing orcs. But their time will come.
So they're doing the around the room at the end, and then they just skip you and say, "No, we're not doing orcs. I'm sorry."
Yeah, pretty much.
We gotcha. Okay. So coming back around to the community angle and the community, interfacing with your game long term, because everyone who's here knows, since we're literally doing this right now, games don't end with shipping, and they haven't for a long time.
Nope.
So we've had a really significant tail end so far. We've had 5 years plus of interacting with the
Yeah.
game, and I know it, and a lot of people in the room right now, virtually, know that interaction from our side, but we haven't really seen it from your side. What's that interaction been like from your side? So I kind of wanted to talk about that for a time. So maybe we can start it off with a specific, if that works. So the specific would be like, can you tell us about an example where the back and forth with the community came up in your day-to-day work? It could be recent, it could be whatever comes to your mind. Just to kind of
Yeah.
kick us off.
But I mean, the main thing that comes to mind is kind of the decision to run these like big balancing betas, or just trying to have some kind of close knit forum with players. I think there's quite some freedom at Fatshark. Like there's a recommendation where it's like, yeah, we'll go hang out on the forums and interact with people, but don't interact too much and tell everyone all the secrets that we're planning in the future, because we don't trust you because you're gonna run off and be a super enthusiastic dev, kind of thing. So I mean, for me personally, and for most of the guys, it's been a lurking session that lasted many years. Like I think I spent the first year or two just hanging out on all of the community sites and like in the Reddit, reading every single thing, and then at times you kind of jump in and go like, yes, read everything, and then you get likes, and then you feel okay. One of the things that is important to realize is there's a balance, right? Like if I hang around on the forums and discuss things and read things, that's hours of the day that goes away, right? Those hours could be spent tweaking up a weapon, rebalancing a thing, solving an issue. And it's like you notice around release weeks where like the velocity of the teams and the production rate just goes down. It just floors. Everyone's on the forums and everyone's like watching reviews and checking out stuff, and it's such a personal thing that your mind pretty much shuts down. You go into crowd pleaser mode where it's like, oh my god, I saw this guy and he's my favorite streamer, and he said that this weapon needs to do this and we have to go do that now. And you know, you kind of need to calm yourself down a bit to take a bit more objective look at it, I suppose you can call it. So just establishing the we didn't call them big balancing betas, but like we talked about, we need to create for our schedule a very focused forum where we can say during these 2 or 3 weeks we're actually going to invite people, we're going to do a subset, or we're going to do whatever we can to find a manageable amount of people to talk to not have all of the time from the team run away. Because if you're talking to thousands of people, you know, you're going to be reading a lot and you're not going to get anything done. But just trying to get that discourse where we can pretty much the same thing we do within the team and pretty much the same thing we do with the QA, we can have that back and forth session of like, we build a thing, we test a thing, we talk about the thing, we do the changes as we're talking, and then you just hit commit, rebuild, and send it out to people. So you don't have that lead time of like 2 weeks to get stuff that you just talked about into the hands of players. Now we do this internally quite a bit, but I think the longer the community lives, I mean, it becomes your game to a way higher degree than it's our game. So it's kind of important to include people from the community who are actual players, who don't have those like, well, I remember what we did in the first prototypes, and those are my darlings kind of decisions. And I think it's a good form just to. I mean, it's fun for me and the team to actually be able to actively like plan time to engage with people and do that back and forth. And I think it's a good vent for the community to have some input on stuff. Plus, it's always fun to like try crazy shit out where you can go like, well, I just built a thing where the two-handed hammer will one-shot a rat ogre. Let's try it out with some guys and see how they react, or stuff like that. A bit closer to production, I guess.
It's going to be hard to go back in your mind.
Yeah,
But when you're building Vermintide 1,
yeah.
were you anticipating the long tail, the dedicated player base, the Dark Souls esque mastery seeking players? Did you design with that in mind?
I don't think the studio as a whole did necessarily. I think we've had very like a lot of different approaches to it. Some it's been very much of a like, I like Warhammer. It's a Warhammer like tribute game in a way. To a lot of people, it's been way more of a Left 4 Dead thing, where it's a social thing, like because they come from that sort of community. I think from my perspective, I think I mentioned like Dark Soul-esque mastery stuff week 3 at Fatshark, and talked and tried to build in that direction, because like if we have that foundation, you're gonna have long-term players. You're gonna and I think like that's what makes my job meaningful to me. If I can provide that to someone, where you can just you have your little toy and you can play with it, and it gives you a sense of purpose and some flow, because I know that I appreciate that in my own kind of gaming history. uh, that is also an excellent foundation to build a community, to build a long tail, to build a good game on. And I don't really care if it's 5 people or 50 or like 1,500, because I don't know, like my mind doesn't work like that. I'm just happy to see people come in. I remember when we did, like my first job I had, we did Just Cause 2, like, and I did all of the stunts and all the physics and all of the like all the action stuff for that. The first demo we sent out, I think it was downloaded like 800,000 times, and everyone at the studio went apeshit and like in like panic. Oh my god, there's so many people! Ah! And I was like, I have to find the guys who figure out that you can tether a car to a helicopter and do the stunt things. Just see if the core mechanical, that flow thing of mastery kind of interlinks somewhere in it. And I think it's been the same thing for me with Vermintide. Like I remember, like the first time I saw some of your content, it was like, yeah, this guy kind of gets it. He's in the, like, you can do the combo, and then you can do the thing, and then you can do the dodge thing, and you can do that thing, and that's going to be very good for this very specific particular situation. So I mean, I think that plays towards Fat Shark's strengths, and one of the reasons why I kind of stay there. The combat team is really, really into the flow of the core mechanics. Like the narrative team is really into the voice lines and like getting the quirky characters out there. The world team is really into getting the levels and the story and everything and the lore correct, and they sit and fiddle like, well, should a lamp really look like this in the old world in this part of the empire? No, it shouldn't. It should probably be a bit more intricate or whatever. So everyone is kind of super focused on their little part, and together it hopefully comes together to become something that's quite enjoyable to play.
So, going back to starting the game, you want to make something that mastery is as attractive. Like, it's got to feel good
Yep.
from the beginning. The combat's
Yep.
got to feel good, and it's got to work right. So complexity is
Yep.
a thing. Blah blah blah.
Yep.
And we've nailed this. And there, from the beginning, you could tell that there was something good about the feel. Like going back to Rat's chats and his team, they were
Yep.
playing hardcore within weeks of release, right?
Yep.
So you knew you had something special. But they, my friend, were playing Cataclysm with consistent rates within weeks,
Yep.
and pubs were not that far behind them. I started a couple months into it, like December or January,
Yep.
and I was doing full book cata runs with close to 100% completion rate.
Yep.
March, Feb, right? By level 80 or something, what have you. And that was kind of it. There really wasn't
Yep.
anywhere else to go at that point, and there wasn't for a long time. So when I came back, I tried other games. I came back in January. I'm like, I love this game. I want to play more. I know there's nowhere else to go with it, but I'm gonna, by golly, make my own challenges. I'm gonna
Yep.
speed run. I'm gonna do something. There was a big disconnect there. My guess by the language is that Cataclysm was supposed to be so hard it took us months and months to get to that point, or something. Because it did feel like we hit a wall and there was nothing else to do, no mountains to climb for a long time until Mod
Sure.
saved us.
And I mean, I think we were quite aware of that thing. I think it comes down to clear-cut scoping decisions, to be honest. I mean, if you go back and remember, the core pillars are co-op and Warhammer. It is not Dark Souls pleasing flow junkies to the extremes. So it's about managing our resources to a degree. Like if I were told, dude, you get 2 months, go build the stuff that the modding community in Grimmalect is doing with like onslaughts and stuff and everything, we could have done that.
For sure.
I don't think I don't think I, as a designer, necessarily excel at building challenges like that, because it's way more of a bespoke challenge. It's more into boss fight territory and like clutch moment designs. Just speaking from experience, I'm more of a make it feel good and make it like function at a broader sense. Uh, but it comes down to like the discussions we have in the studio and the direction we're getting from the game director and from the management and the team, where it's like, do we want to take this into a direction where we go super deep on the difficulty levels, or do we want to make like start working on extra content, or solve some of the other issues, or start working on the second game, or where do we go from there? So like I can have an opinion on those things as a lowly game designer, which is pretty much just tell me what you want me to do. I know we have a community that really wants these challenges. I know that half the studio are super comfortable on like recruit and veteran. I know that I'm like, and the combat team, we're more on the higher end of the gameplay. We have a couple of guys, like specifically our accountant for some godforsaken reason. He's insane. He's like, yeah, this game is too easy. I'm gonna like, dude, you're supposed to fix our salaries, not sit around and like play the game. But we brought him in to like fact check and ensure that the difficulties were kind of on par. So we knew that we're gonna have like the small percentage of elite players. They're just gonna breeze through a lot of these things. Like we can try to jump up the numbers, but we did not spend a large amount of time trying to fine tune Cataclysm, basically because we didn't have the players around in the office, because the game was new, no one had learned it pretty much, to actually test that. And when it comes to patching, we can do stuff for Cataclysm, but we saw quite early that there's going to be a community driven thing. We have other things to focus on as well.
One momento, sorry, hold on. I'm getting feedback because I think the stream came over to us. I don't think we're getting
technicalities of twitching.
I don't think we're getting the record. Welcome everyone. Welcome, hello. I'm glad everyone's been listening in. If you have questions, I am looking at them. So if something really jumps out at me, I will bring it up. Otherwise, let's continue. Sorry about that, sir. Continue.
No. Yeah, I don't know if I had a lot of more things to
Okay,
say.
so
but, I mean, it's basically a high-level decision. Like, do we do this or not? And we didn't.
So with that in mind, modding took some time to jump in. We just had a long conversation, we being the festival folks, with Grim. And then tomorrow we'll take a look at speedrunning and True Solo a bit, so the other kind of spokes in our direction as a community to come up with things to keep doing. Other mountains to climb, because we made a game that's so fun to have mastery, we want to continue to seek mastery. So were there discussions on modding and making modding possible, or like being happy with modding being a thing in Vermintide early in its inception?
Sure. I mean, again, I think that's mainly like a resource discussion thing as well. I mean, as I said earlier, Fatshark has always been historically quite a like code-driven studio. So most of the guys on the floor are like, yeah, well, modding, and it's gonna be super fun, and I can help stuff out. And I know some of the coders have been involved in trying to like help the early modding efforts come into play. There's a difference when you start looking at it from like a publisher view. Now we're the publishers as well, because everything is run within Fatshark anyway, but just like getting everyone that needs to make those kinds of decisions, like getting game direction or marketing involved to just look at all of the mods and have approval rates and stuff. I mean, early on we didn't have the manpower to do stuff like that at all, so we just tried to talk about how can we support stuff and how can we enable things. And it wasn't something that I personally was super involved in, apart from like having community manager go like, dude, can you please provide some explanation to how some of the systems and some of the damage setups actually work? Because they wrote code in to like, yeah, well, the coders can explain it, but the coders didn't really know how they work, because I wrote it for the combat team stuff. So it's kind of anyway. So yeah, I think it's a case of I'm super happy that people are involved and doing mods and trying to do stuff. There's always been how can we support this realistically without just tanking the entire studio's production rate because of the amount of people that needs to either be involved for official reasons or needs to be involved in order to just kind of support and send stuff out.
Do you feel like the way modding was implemented in V2, and I'm sure almost everyone here knows that, but that was 9/10 of modding that does anything gameplay relevant is in mod realm, where there's no progression, no items, no levels, and no pub players. Let's just be real. Only
Yeah,
very hardcore, self-selected players will ever be there,
only
and a
really
very
cool people.
small selection will go to public realm, where they can be like UI type mods. Did,
Yep.
what were the goals? Did it work? Is this maybe outside your domain?
It's kind of outside of the domain, and we're supposed to talk about V1, but no, I think like it's a compromise, as most things are when it comes to resources. Short of someone doing like a heroic weekend effort of unpaid work in the game industry, which we try to avoid, it's basically a process setup where it's like, we want to provide the entire code base to everyone because that's awesome. We want to provide a process where we can like have this council of wise fat sharks look at all the mods and go like, yay, that's a good mod and that's a bad mod and that's another mod. But it comes down to that being a full-time job to some extent, or people being super busy, or people like the processes break down because we're not fail-proof in any rate. I think the baseline setup was kind of sound from, if you talk from a vision point of view, where you have model REM and you have the normal one, and anything that's popular and non-invasive enough and not cheating, we can bring over, and otherwise people can, we create this playground thing for people. I mean, I have no comment on how the actual resulting process came out in terms of speed and quality on that.
Enough said. Roger. Going back into safer territory.
Yeah, cool.
Back into V1 related. Specifically, events, objectives, and especially objectives that require motion, like
Yep.
team motion.
Yep.
There was a lot more motion related objectives. So now I'm thinking of, for example, the Drakenfels finale with those statues that you had to pick up upstairs, get down, go down the stairs, come back around under a heavy event loop, right? And then, of course, we have, I could sit here, waterfront, blah, blah, blah. There was a lot more motion-oriented objectives and motion-oriented team play in V1. And ironically, with V2 having such greater movement potential, it's not as there. But how do you feel about it from a design perspective, from an action perspective? I know from a player, if players spent way too much time on your game perspective, they're my favorite maps, without doubt. You tell me what's your favorite map in Vermintide 1? I love Drakenfels finale, waterfront, ramparts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it comes down to I don't know. To me, I put up my highbrow academic hat, and it comes down to mutability, right? You have a core gameplay loop that works, you have the core pacing that works, and then you do mutability sets of, you do an event and you want to change something. So you give someone a sack and says you have to run with this, or you give them like, you're not supposed to kill stuff, you're just supposed to push through them. Like all of that goes into the event loop. Now the events are built, and I think it affects the outcome. They're built by the world team, and there's a collaboration between the combat team and the world team whenever we go in and build events. So we have this thing. Well, we're gonna need some luggables. We're gonna need some sacks that you carry, and we have to like sync up on the design side and say, so I'm gonna build a thing where we're basically locking a player away. We're gonna lower your movement rate. You're gonna get push because you need to do something, otherwise it's boring as all hell. And you can throw it, and you should be able to kind of juggle it a bit, so you have some sense of entertainment, and then you can use that for whatever you want. And then world goes away and implements that into the levels and build the actual events, and then there's some back and forth. Usually these things are built towards the end of the project, and as always when you have inter-team communication, it's easy to get into this like we either digress in what we're trying to build. It's harder to get a cohesive kind of design implemented in general. I'm not talking specifically about Vermintide events now, but like I've been building games for 16 years, so whenever you don't give a complete ownership of a thing to a single team or a single guy or whatever, it's going to be a bit trickier. With that said, I think I agree. I think the whole like the whole push mechanic, or the whole like get a thing from here over there, it's simple enough. It goes back to that co-op thing. Like it's not a complicated thing for you, the guy who's carrying it, but it is a complicated thing for you as a team. And I think we never really reached the potential of that. anyway, where it's like, well, we want to have a thing where we basically lock one player away, and like the team has to communicate, like, who's going to pick it up? You pick it up, I'm going to protect you. But there's so many things that go into that. Like if you look at slot system and aggro weights and attack intensities and stuff, so the minute details of those things, we've never really got around to polishing that to a point, because we basically played it and say, yeah, well, this kind of works. This is kind of sort of fine. I would love to make a super detailed pass, but I mean, again, it's a resource thing. Like I could spend 3 months tweaking away at like what happens to the enemy behaviors and spawning and conflict director in detail when someone picks up a thing or you have to run. But if it works kind of out of the box and people go like, yeah, we built an event, we picked up a sack and it kind of works, it's super fun,
It is
then we
super
go,
fun.
yeah, it is super fun.
I
Good,
think I
let's go
think
with it.
the Vermintide mechanics translated beautifully to it.
Yep.
I
Yep.
think it translated. It sticks out in my mind
Yep.
from the very beginning. I just one love it. Two, it I think it works from a team play element. So
Yep.
short side missions didn't make it into V2. What were the original design goals with the short missions in V1, or is this again outside domain?
No. I mean, I was part of that, and I think it's fair to say. I mean, you have the baseline is looking at the larger gameplay loop and like considering the different types of people that are going to play it, and we realized quite early on that the Vermintide, like running a mission in Vermintide, specifically if you're at your peak level of difficulty, regardless of what that difficulty is. Like if you're a new player and you play a recruit veteran, it's quite exhausting, right? We had a lot of discussions about that, where it's like we don't foresee a majority of the players being able to socialize with their friends to the degree that we'd like to see in a co-op game, because you can't go like, yeah, so what did you do last weekend? I'm just handling this horde while being chased by storm vermin, and you're juggling a clan rat or a rat ogre, and we're discussing, you know, weekend plans or whatever, as from a more like Left or Deadish social side. We saw it in streamers as well, where people went like, I can't actually play this game because I can't communicate and keep up with chat at the same time, because it's, you know, it can be kind of overwhelming in a way. I think the shorter missions came in from if you only have 15 minutes. I mean, we have a lot of dads and a lot of older guys at the office, and it's like, I don't want to commit to doing an exhausting 30-minute run of like, I almost made it and then I died. If I just want to go in and like, I just want to kill some rats and have a bit of fun, we should be able to have and provide some shorter missions. That just they are shorter missions. They're not really there to drive like loot or progression or anything. It's just a way for you to get into the game and clear a level and kill some rats. Give you a choice, and that should make it easier for people to pick it up and play, so it's not this massive commit for the evening. If I have 45 minutes to play as a dad after kids go to sleep, I should be able to go in and like, I don't pick the long mission, I pick the short mission, and then I sit around, play the game for 3 hours anyway, because it's awesome, hopefully. I mean, then it's always the production aspect of it, where you go like there's some guy who's in charge of planning on the world team goes like, short missions, that sounds really great, because it's like we will actually have time to build them, like because it should take less time to build. Same thing with weapons. It's like, do we do super complicated weapons or do we do simple weapons? Like, well, how much overtime do I want to spend working on stuff? So there's always that part of it too.
Oh God, I definitely had
What?
something for this.
Sorry.
So I guess just riffing on this for a moment. So it sounds somewhat like some of the side missions that actually came out of this. If
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about this from an organizational perspective for a
Yeah.
moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is not something I think most gamers ever do when they think about their favorite video game, right? So the level design, the
No.
world team suddenly is like, oh, I have X amount of time assigned to this map, but I have a lot less I have to do. So I can dig in more and make it more complicated or interesting in some way, rather than I had to design a whole map and the event at the end as well. So maybe that's why you end up with black powder. or something to this effect. I'm just riffing. I'm just riffing.
Yeah. I mean, I think specifically for those things, we looked at. I know we had some discussions where it's like, do we just do a normal like run through of the level, or
But
can we
short.
do something a bit more? Yeah, but short. Is that interesting? And I think like to me, my involvement as a designer tends to be, and I think we in general try to push the design department in that when we don't want to be too specific with stuff. We want to have, I mean, the game director should be in a vision. It's co-op Warhammer, great. It should feel good to kill things. Okay, good. But then design should say we want to have like just normal advanced missions, and then we want to have like co-play challenges, or we want to have specific event levels. But we want to leave the detailed design down to the designers and the team that actually implements it, because otherwise it becomes this top level controlled hierarchical mess of I have to envision every single fucking detail in the game and micromanage all of the workers, which is just a bad way of doing games. You can look at other studios that tend to do that, and the games don't become fun, and people are sad when they work there. So I mean, I think when we talk about them from a like organizational design perspective, we're basically saying, do we want to do the same thing on advanced mission, or do we want to do something that's a bit more involved or like an event-based level? Well, I mean, it's going to be cheaper for us to do a single location. It's going to be more interesting for players to go in. I just don't want to go in and run this cool little event thing. And then we say, yeah, we'll go do it, have fun, figure something out. And then we sort the problems out as we stumble upon them. And I think, I mean, it's hit or miss. I know we've done some iterations internally before we even released on some of the missions where we like tried to do stuff where we go do one thing and then it's just like, nah, this one, it's not a 15-minute thing, it's going to be a 30-minute thing anyway, or it's not like this is, I can might as well drop in and do a normal mission, and it's going to be way more interesting. So it always comes down to the quality of things. Is it actually bringing something to the table? I think. But it's yeah.
Do you want to talk weapons?
Yeah, sure.
Because we're at the hour mark. We can keep going,
Oh,
sir.
okay. Yeah. No, that's fine.
Okay, so big picture. You're sitting down.
I have a question first. What's your favorite weapon from
V1?
Yeah.
I mean, my answer has to be Hagbane.
Okay. Okay.
Has to be Hagbane. I love Sword Dagger as well, but I feel like Hagbane became the thing. It's a Swiss Army knife. Probably somewhat through unintended consequences, it ended up being extremely...
we were quite aware. We had that discussion early on when talking about it. Like, how the hell do we make this into not a tank and control and boss killer and everything else where you can just use it to get out of dodge in any situation kind of thing? And then we played it, and it's like, well, it's kind of fun. Well,
yeah, it's awesome.
Leave it. But it always comes down to that, though. Like, you can have these high-level design goals where you're like, we need to make a thing that's really about like you poison the guy and then you wait him out, and like, but like that's not fun. We just made it into an explosion instead, and that's way more fun. It just staggers everything now. Like, okay, yeah, well, like just scratch the old design. We're just gonna do this instead.
Just gonna do this now.
Yeah, and then I have people come to me like, dude, we said we're gonna do this thing with it, but now it does something completely different. And I go like, yeah, because it's more fun that way. So now that's what we're doing.
It had so many subtle elements that you didn't notice until you'd played with it for a long time too. It has that same mastery feel. So, okay, it has an explosion. So does that mean I should be just spamming the rats, or should I be spamming feet to control them in a particular place?
Yeah.
And then there's the subtle finger roll. So there's a trade-off there between accuracy and rate of fire if you do the mechanics. So it also has those elements. So maybe we could take it that way first and then come back to the more general question. It turns out there are a lot of mechanical tricks in Vermintide because of the complexity of the underlying game, right? And because of little decisions that were made. So one of the little ones that I bring up to people is if you don't have mouse wheel duplicate bound to light it to attack, you're hurting yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and then sometimes it can be carpal tunnel inducing Q canceling and such. So you guys have known about these forever. You probably even knew about them before you shipped, or a good chunk of them.
Yep.
So it at times it starts feeling like a fighting game almost at the highest level.
Yep.
Following design intention that this was foreseen and desired.
Yep, pretty much. I mean, when I started looking at it and tried to find an approach for the first-person melee combat, like a lot of the inspiration came from like pure fighting games and the setup for that. Like, there's a reason we have a light combo that you can cancel because it enables us to do something that's quite enjoyable if you just come in and click. You don't have to know a lot of tricks to just be able to play the game. You can just click your way through a bunch of rat, and it's cool and it's awesome, and it's like gratuitous violence all over the place, and heads are flying, and you feel like a badass. But within that loop, we can hide a lot of little, like if you do 2 light attacks and then cancel into a heavy, and then go do another, then like you, I think like the one hand elf sword. I saw you play it after we did it, and you have that thing where you go like you have the overhead and you have the stab, but if you do the push follow up followed by a heavy and then go to the light, you get like 2 overheads, and then I don't remember how the hell I set it up, but I hid that little nugget of like, this is gonna take some time. And then I saw you stream and you were like, this weapon sucks, I don't like this weapon. And then you went like, but wait a minute, can I, how the, like, and you found that little nugget of combinationary things and went like, this is quite a nice weapon. I can probably kill a Chaos Warrior with this. And I'm like, yes, you can. You can kill a Chaos Warrior with that because we set it up that way. I think it's a very, I mean, we don't design these sort of things on that level with the combinations or the clicking. It's basic. I mean, our approach to designing weapons is pretty much just, yeah, we're going to do a sword now. What's it going to be? Oh, it's going to be kind of Lionsman Ninja Fancy. Okay, and then like I grab it and we just sit together with an animator and build a set and then tweak it up and build all of these little nuanced things for a week, and then we're done and committed. And then someone later down the line comes and asks, how does it work? And I'm go like, I don't really remember. We should probably play it and check the code because I just made stuff that felt good. But yeah, I think the combat fighting game thing is on point. I think the carpal tunnel, I can be a testament of that. I work for 6 hours at Fatshark with this sort of gameplay. I need to go do exercises and like do stuff because it can become a problem. Definitely. Yeah.
So when you do a game, it's almost a new weapon. It sounds like it's kind of a sprint. You have
Yep.
an idea. I'm sure you've got animators who prototype something quickly.
Mm.
And what do you sit there with a whiteboard and try to think to yourselves, well, light 1 should go into light 2, but it also should be able to go
No,
into heavy 2. So let me draw a little
we
flow
kind
chart.
no. I mean, we tried that at a point. We work mainly out of sets. We have this design principle that I try to enforce. Where we basically have the gestalts, and we have the gestalts tied into different directions and what they're supposed to be doing. So you have the linesmen that cut through multiple guys, create corpse walls, steady patapong kind of, nothing fancy. You have the tank pushing, controlling, staggering. You have the smiter, which is pretty much, I'm 12 years old, I want to bring the biggest weapon I can find, and I just want to press it once, and then something dies, preferably something that no one else in the team could kill, so everyone does a little golf applaud at the end and go, oh my god, thank god we had that carry guy around because he just killed the Chaos Warrior or the Storm Fiend, since we're talking Vermintide 1. And then we have the Ninja Fencer, which basically is just Carillion who runs off and does her thing somewhere else. So when we talk about the weapons, we pretty much just go back to those things. And the lingo is established within the team in order for us to not have to go into those kinds of details. So we're pretty much given, like we have it depends on where the weapon comes from. If it's like we've been asked to do a pack of new weapons, then we can go, yeah, we want to do this, we want to do a spear, we want to do a throwing axe, or whatever. Like in some cases, and particularly me joining the team 6 months in, we already had a bunch of weapons built, so we're basically just given, here's a little hammer for the dwarf, and we go like, what the hell do we do with this? So we sit down in the team and we just have a discussion and go like, yeah, it's clearly a tank weapon, so let's make something that's kind of tank smiter. And that's pretty much it, because the animators knows what a smiter attack and usage for that. So we make a set out of it, and the animator sets up an initial kind of, this feels good from an animation point of view. I saw a question in the chat if we play with little toy swords. Since I work from home now, no, we play with proper swords. It's really difficult to do this from home. You have to move the webcam and put it like here and then go like, I think we should be doing this. But basically, animation does its thing, I grab it, and then I change all of the animations around and say like, dude, I just had an epiphany. We should be doing a stab in the middle of it to find something that's a bit more interesting and sets it apart from the other weapons. Specifically, when you start getting up into the 40s and 50s numbers of weapons, you don't want to have something that's too copy pasty, and then we just do that back and forth. So there's a lot of friction. There's a lot of stepping on toes. There's a lot of I went to the state machine and changed the timing of the animation because it plays better now. And then animation goes and like I changed the animation for it because I think it should be a bit more like this. And then we have a final weapon after a week or so, or 2 or 3 or 5, depending on how complicated things are and how busy we are with other things, because we also have weapons and bugs and community stuff and other stuff to do. But it's a very kind of it's not a design document driven process where we go minute detail and timing on frames. But I mean, you kind of get that naturally when working together with people closely. It's the way I like working. You don't have a replaceable animator or a replaceable coder. You have a team, and we know how to build weapons. So we just need to look at each other and go like, make it a bit more ninja fancy, make it a bit more ninja fancy, and then we go make it a bit more ninja fancy, and then you're more happy because you like ninja fancy stuff and hagbane.
So the particular part of the weapon design I'm thinking of right now is the exact actual hitboxes for the sweeps.
Yep.
Which I've only recently been able to debug on my end. And
Yep.
there is some wide variance in the sweeps being elegant, exactly what you expect them to it increases its distance like this up into the left rising, but then comes over to the right and extends far. So therefore,
Yep.
if you've always felt like it's impossible to headshot, it's because it really is. Because if it's really close, you have to look up and to the right, but if it's far, you got to look up and to the left.
Yep.
How does that happen?
Well, I mean, it's a non-exact science, I think. As I said, we go about it in a very kind of agile and ad hoc, chaotic way, if you will, if you're from the outside. Like in Vermintide 1, everything is driven by the animation, right? So in order for us not to set up a system where someone like me needs to hand draw splines and shit, we basically just take the animation data from the sword, and then we append a hitbox to it, and then we go sweep. So if the animation changes, the hitbox changes with it. It enables us to be very, very fast, like changing stuff out. So if the animator goes, I'm going to do a punch with this axe, we have a hitbox already being animated with it. Now, that works really bad out of the box. Usually, you need to apply a layer of fuckery to it, if you will. You need to go into code and basically override a couple of offsets and a couple of rotations and a couple of like distance modifiers and stuff. So none of that was really like requested, and we don't have a tool for it. It's basically just we go into the code and I sit and go like, sweep code. If I have this weird flag for that thing, we should be doing this, or we should reshape the hitbox in order to achieve a well-playing weapon that reaches the functions that we're striving for. So in the instance of headshotting, that's a very ninja fancy thing for me. So there's a particular subset of weapons that should be good at headshotting. There are some weapons where I've felt that from balancing reasons, they shouldn't be good at headshotting. Now, sometimes you get a weapon and we have an animation that looks really good, but the hitbox is horrible, right? And then
Stabbing,
you have,
cough.
yeah, kind of thing. And you have to make a sort of decision where you go, we can adjust it a bit through code, but we can't place the hitbox up here and have the sword cut that way, right? Because that's going to feel off. It's going to feel bad. We can change the animation, but that's going to sacrifice the uniqueness of the weapon. And we're really kind of in love with that right now, for instance. And then it becomes a balancing act. If we make this harder to headshot with, where you have to like jump and do the thing, can we compensate that with more dodging? Can we compensate that with another attack in the light chain? Can we change something else? So it's a very kind of case by case thing where we go basically just pick up what's brought into the shop and try to figure out how can we best solve for it. Now, we have best practices for it. It's one of the reasons why we have this, like if you're doing smiter attacks or if you're doing headshotting attacks, we kind of want them to go in and up because it enables us to do good headshotting with it. But you're always going to end up with like quirky animations because someone got creative or did something, and you find problems in any game production that you need to solve on the kind of minute level, and sometimes there's no way around it, and we just go, oh fuck it, you're not gonna headshot with this, you're gonna have to do some other things.
But it's
Right.
what you're saying now is very consistent with the bigger picture stuff you were saying earlier, where
Yeah,
how do I make this feel good? Well, I've got a weapon. How would one use it?
yeah,
So
yeah,
that drives part of the process, but you're also thinking of the mechanical implications at the same time. So it,
yeah.
it does sound like it's an organic process.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, it's controlled by a very high level of like Gestalt proclamations, where we say like Kruber, he should be very he should never be Nina Fancy re, and like Carillion should never be tanky, so she can't have those stagger push everyone around until we make a shield for her for some godforsaken reason and break that pattern. But you have these interpretable design goals that we set up for stuff, and then it's more of an artistic freedom of the team to set stuff up. And I mean, I think it usually pans out. If nothing else, it creates a fun workspace environment where we should be able to produce things fast. But at times, it's I mean, as with any process and any kind of design, it's going to be not working very well for certain things. If you do super special weapons, for instance, you're going to break that pattern, and you're going to end up with something that's imbalanced or not working or not driving towards the intent that is perceived by the player, where you go like, I think this weapon should be able to do this, and then it can't. It's supposed to be used some other way. And then you have to sit around and be ashamed and just eat the flame wars on Reddit, which is, it's good for the soul.
Just know when we whine, it's because we don't think you're we don't think you're listening.
No, 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 no,
You
no.
you know
That's
this, of
fine. Like
course.
I'm from up north in Sweden. I grew up by the Arctic Circle. There's no positivity in anything normally. So yeah, I feel right at home, and I'm a middle child, so I still want to please everyone.
So clearly the chat is much too small of a sample size. But if you scroll up with favorite weapons and such, I guess what I wanted to touch on briefly is,
Yeah.
do numbers mean anything to you guys? Do you use them? I know you have the
Then,
potential. What do they do? What are the people using? What are they
oh, yeah, okay.
successful
Yeah,
with?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Do you have
Yeah.
granular detail down to what attacks are they using, etc.? Or is it? I'm sure
Yeah,
not.
yeah. I mean, we can pick it up. We've had some reports. There's an ongoing struggle with telemetry. I mean, we can. I know we had reports, and we definitely look at numbers, but it's an ongoing thing where it's like, as soon as you work as a designer, you either can get numbers fed to you, or you can ask for particular things, right? And that's always it's a learning process for any studio, I think, where it's like I've had sessions both at Fatshark and at other places where it's like the data guys come and like, look, this build is super overpowered because it has a much higher win rate. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I built it. It's super overpowered. I'm gonna fix it in the next patch. And then you're dragged into a meeting and has to sit getting stuff explained to you for an hour that you already know because you built it. You're in the community and you play the game, so you kind of already know all the stuff. At other times you can like use that and check for certain things, like with the Hagbane, how much like do people actually use it for the AoE, and how many hits actually hit a target or not, to verify certain numbers. Like with the stuff that I do, it's hard to do telemetry right, because it's such a balance between feeling good and overpowered stuff. I think from a personal perspective, it's better used to do large scale stuff or like uh, progression rated things if you have clear cut choices, like because it's a perceived value thing. Uh, I know we had a surprisingly good success early on, because one of the things that I was worried about is like we have the setup with the classes. How many people are gonna get locked into roles that they don't want to play? Like say everyone want to play Carillion all the time, and everyone is bummed out when they play anyone else, right? That should be reflected in the telemetry, where we have like a lot of Carillions and the others should be lower. But like from the get-go in Vermintide 1, we had quite an even split across all of the characters, and it didn't go away. So it's like that was really nice to see that people didn't feel one of the characters didn't get bullied by the community, for instance. But it's kind of at
Surprising.
that level.
That
Yeah,
was
yeah,
even
yeah.
that was
No,
even in early V1. That was pretty smooth.
Yeah. Surprisingly smooth. I like my first reaction to it was like, yeah, you messed up. You don't have the right telemetry. It cannot be this like even in the selection of characters with this amount of players.
So, staying in the telemetry vein, and then
Yep.
also thinking about what are the data points that we should be looking at to know if we're on track. Looking at win rates and such
Yep.
might of course be the problem of what question did you ask? Did you ask the right question? Because there are
Yeah.
certain builds and types of ways of playing and such that are going to make you very successful for low skill players on veteran or whatever the
Yeah.
normal that have nothing to
Yeah.
do with how successful that same build and player will be in
On
6
high
months, 3 months
difficulties.
on Cataclysm.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a moving target as well because it's like, is there a problem that there are meta builds that the community drive? Like, how much does that influence? How many people go into the game and just look at like, what does the guys on Reddit say I should be using, and then they go and win games on that because they're playing a champion or whatever. Like, it's hard to do measured things. I mean, I think it's hard to drive design decisions on a granular level using telemetry that way. It's way easier to have a team that like knows the game and like knows which stuff is buildable and which stuff is kind of slightly overpowered, and then we can just change it or like shake up the meta or do the thing where we do a big balancing beta and do it together with the community instead. There are stuff that you can pick out of the telemetry, like do we spawn an Ogrin on ramparts, and how does that affect the restart rate of that mission? Like the fail rate is higher, and the fail rate isn't higher for people who reach past the place where you can get thrown off, but it's higher for people who reach the first boss spawner and realize that you got a boss at the wrong place, and then they restart the level. Like stuff like that we can pick up on and then do high level design pacing decisions on. But for most of the granular stuff with loadout selections and meta gameplay, it makes more sense just to know your game and hang out in the community and lurk a lot.
It's interesting to hear. I'm gonna take a quick look through chat, see if I missed something here. Okay. So, action team, how much of pacing type decisions do you guys own?
All of them.
All of them. So you're the
Yeah.
guy to talk about the AI director.
Yep.
Okay.
Pretty
So
much anything we do in game
okay.
is
So
our
all
stuff.
the stuff that we've been digging through in Lua for years has been uncovering all the random things you've done then.
Yeah, pretty much. It's me and a whiskey on a late Saturday, and yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the very beginning then. The intensity cycles, horde
Yep.
cooldowns. What were you
Yep.
trying to get the feel of going through a map to be like? What was the target?
Well, I think initially, early on, a lot of inspiration was drawn from just how the Left 4 Dead approach, where we want to have this, we want to have peaks and lows in the thing. To me, it comes down to the definition of what's around and what's an encounter, right? We want to create this thing where we engage the player, because if you throw the same mix at everyone for 30 minutes, it's going to get boring. You need to switch stuff out. So it comes down to building the weapon and core mechanics in such a way that we can actually challenge different gameplay styles. So you're forced to switch out either who's running at the forefront or just switch out your playstyle. Now, in order to do that, we need to be able to throw different things at you. In order to throw different things at you, we need different enemies and different situations. And we needed to reach a mix. Like for Vermintide 1, we didn't have a lot. We had like the Stormworm and we had the Clan Rats, but just throwing Stormworms in there, or throwing a few Clan Rats, or throwing a lot of Clan Rats, or throwing specific specials in the cycle creates like a sum that's greater than its parts in a way. Just like the way we built the slot system and the cleave mechanics and the lines manning and stuff, just throwing a single stormworm into a horde totally changes the horde experience, which is kind of key for us to be able to build pacing at all. Now, so you have this thing where you try to reach as many different combinations of things. It's basically like you're being a chef and you're just throwing everything in, like we can do pepper and sugar and whatever into buckets, and then on top of that you create this conflict director that needs to I mean, initially it's basically just a timed sinus curve kind of thing. But then you start looking into stuff like what is actually going to be driving intensity? When do we want to cut it off? How fast do we want to cut it off? How much of space do we want to give in between? Which is an interesting balancing act, specifically on the different difficulties, because it's hard to know when the player is kind of fed up. Is that after 30 minutes? There's a variable time thing there, because depending on how fast you kill and how much damage you're soaking, the intensity is going to work differently. So you need to basically do a tailor-made tweak on each and every difficulty, envisioning different players. Where it's like, if you do the higher difficulties, you probably want to push a bit more, but you want to drop it off as soon as you start taking damage, because the damage values are kind of different as well. So you can't just count the hits. There's a lot of testing that goes into it, I would say, and weird little things that you have to resort to get it to work. It's all a blur for me.
Can I talk about a quirk or two that might jog your
Yeah,
memory? So
yeah,
one of the decisions that sort of is surprising in retrospect is the horde timer for the next horde starts when the first one spawns,
yeah,
not
yeah,
when it's mostly dead,
yeah, yeah. I
which
know.
is a punishment for slow kill parties, and it still exists in
Yeah,
V2.
yeah,
Uh, did you consider it?
yeah. No, no, definitely. I think it's been a back and forth discussion. I mean, it's again, we don't work from a design perspective on those levels of details where we go, this is a ticket for code to change the horde timer to actually spawn on this rate. We bring it into the team and we talk about it, and then I go hack it together and change something, and we scream at each other and like argue. I think I pushed at times for it to be changed to be at the end of the horde timer. I think we changed it back and forth a bit, and the main consideration there was the pacing system. Like, if we spawn a horde at you and you fail at that horde, the pacing system is the thing that should give you time enough to relax in between.
The intensity
Um,
system.
yeah, the
So,
intensity.
guys, when
Yeah,
Mats,
yeah,
can I just make sure everyone's on the same page about this? Because most people don't know this mechanic.
yeah,
The intensity system basically it mostly is, did somebody get downed, or
yeah,
do they take a whole bunch of damage?
yeah,
That means that person has a lot of intensity. If multiple
yeah,
players have high intensity, you have a high average intensity. If the high average intensity kicks in, the game says, I'm not spawning stuff for a while, you guys need a break.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it almost never kicks in V2 Cataclysm, very rarely
Nope.
in V1 Cataclysm. It's
Yeah,
mostly for
yeah,
veteran and lower
yeah,
difficulties.
yeah. So I think it can be a thing where it probably works better for the lower end difficulties where people are playing worse, but on higher difficulty. I mean, because looking at Cataclysm, we basically just disable the whole pacing system and throw
Correct.
everything at you.
Correct.
And then those timings and those interactions with the horde timers and special timers, they kind of like the environment changes, and thus it kind of breaks down a bit. And it's one of the results of us not really being super good at testing and verifying everything at Cataclysm, because we're hard pressed to find people within the studio that can clear Cataclysm with any kind of predictability, unless we bring in the accountant. But in that case, we don't get paid. So it's kind of,
It
you
sounds
know,
like a hitman name, the accountant, El
yeah, no,
Contador.
no, yeah, yeah,
Got to
yeah,
put it in
yeah.
Spanish. So it's interesting though. So because there
Yep,
becomes an unintended consequence with Cataclysm, because
yep,
the clear rates go down,
yep,
so that horde timer kicking in at the beginning
yep.
instead of the end means the time in between hordes dramatically decreases, and you start losing that
No, yeah,
heartbeat of
definitely.
intensity, that heartbeat
Yeah.
of difficulty.
Plus, I know, I mean, we reduce the time between hordes as well. I think we reduce the randomness of it as well, but it basically puts a clock on the team, which it says, if you're unable to clear a horde in 5 to 10 seconds, you're
You,
going to be up shit creek.
you're never going to make any progress.
No, no, no.
So
You're
it
never gonna get
really
anything.
emphasizes 4 people slaying.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Or at
yeah.
least like you need to have one or two of the guys equipped with stuff that are dedicated towards clearing hordes.
Okay.
Because everyone can't run around sword dagger like, or I mean that's a bad example to some degree, but you can't have everyone play whatever they want. You need to have an active discussion within the team. That was the intent anyway. Like, if we just push this as far as it goes, we should see people try to do the meta discussion of about loadout selections, where you're basically catering towards different solutions within the game. Where you're like, if we spawn 12 storm vermins at you, you probably want to have handguns, and you probably want to have 200 hammers or something that can clear that out. Like, so you need to actually do a setup for it.
So
Yeah.
So talking pacing in the abstract, thinking about boss triggers.
Yep.
So the game changes pretty dramatically once your metagame knowledge gets
Yep.
up to snuff. The
Yep.
boss is no longer a thing that just kicks in. It's a deliberate decision that you make. I'm
Yep.
going to go exactly to this point, clear the Horde as fast as possible so the Horde timer is as generous as possible before I walk into this trigger here because it's the worst trigger in the game and it'll give me optimal time to kill the boss in isolation. You know we all do this. You knew this was going to
Yeah.
happen originally.
Yep.
So, are you still happy with the way the system works? What was the intent?
Well, I think it's a technical result, and I mean, you're always. I mean, you can either you can specify like super advanced features across the board, or you build something and then you live with those consequences. So I mean, looking at the boss corner, I can imagine a world where we have dynamically placed bosses, where we do a lot of more fancy like pacing integrated stuff with tweaking and tuning and how many and at what time we could rebuild the slot system. One of the things that we talked about during Vermintide to allow you to better have multiple bosses. We didn't, so we basically built a system that only supports one. At the end of the day, we will link in the boss positioning to the level design, and that comes with a certain level of rigidity and readability, where you know that, oh hey, there's going to be a boss there or there when I come across this thing possibly. I'm kind of sort of fine with stuff like that because it's always nice to have you have level knowledge. I think it's part of the progression rather than the top of the mastery curve, because it's nice. It's a nice feeling the first time that like I know all the maps and I know where all the bosses is, but it's not something that keeps giving after you kind of clear Cataclysm at a regular level. So like to support that level of play, you could definitely do some stuff where you change things up, or I mean, we talked about doing boss patrols and all kinds of things, or having packmasters riding a rat ogre in, things like that, just to spice things up. But we never got around to it.
So, I'm finding it very hard not to venture into V2 territory. I'm finding it very hard not to. So, thinking about the goal for a 35-minute run through a
Yep.
map of a normal length map. It means with the pacing decisions and such and the placements of it, you've got a pretty good feel for the peaks, the valleys, the big peak where things barely are survived and the pacing
Yep.
system shuts off and you get a moment to walk through the map. So you have this. And then you also, I'm just spiffing here. So
Yep.
also at the same time, you've done things to control item spawns, so they're relatively evenly distributed in such a way, etc. So it looks like there was a lot of careful thought that went into making sure players have a heartbeat, but have
Yep.
opportunities to recover in a
Yep.
reasonable way. Is there
Yep.
a way to see? I mean, you could just watch us play and see that we figured it out, right?
I don't know.
And
I
it
know. I know you
works.
figured it out.
Now, I don't mean the
Uh,
mechanics. I mean like
no, no.
from an intuitive way within months of release. Like
Yeah.
we
Yep.
got it. It worked.
Yeah.
What was your feeling like when you're like, oh my? So all this hypothetical stuff actually works. Is it really awesome to be a game designer in that
I don't know.
sense?
It's good. I mean, one of the best feelings ever is being. I think the whole streaming thing really kind of shifted that around. Like earlier in the career, when streaming wasn't really a thing, it was really hard to get any sort of feedback apart from like going either and ask people at shows or getting random angry letters or happy letters, which isn't really, it doesn't showcase the core experience. Now we play the game a lot within the studio, particularly as we're close to release. I have a distinct need to find players within the office, like the accountant and stuff, and a bunch of other guys. So we can play the game continuous and know that it works. But it's a completely different feeling going and watching like a YouTube clip or watching a stream and be able to see. And it's one of the most valuable things that you can have as a designer, because I don't need to talk to you. I can see, particularly streamers who show like what they're doing with the mouse and keyboard, where I go like, yeah, he got that thing, good, and he's doing that thing, that's good, and just watch the team progress and like you slow down and you just to manage kind of the peaks and ebbs of the hordes, manage the pacing system, and manage kind of boss spawns and stuff like that. It's it's interesting. Some of the things are really awesome when it kind of, yay, you're doing exactly, or you found a thing, or that's really great, or it's actually working. Other things are like the true solo or speedrun community thing. It's one of the things that we've been actively kind of, how the hell do we make sure that we don't just run through a level, but at the same time not like mess up speedrunners, because we don't want the average meta to be like, we're not playing the game, we're just running and pushing all the time. Stuff like that can be kind of, oh fuck, they figured out the thing that enables them to do the other thing, and it's
Threat capping.
yeah. It's, I mean, it's a rabbit hole that you easily can get lost in as a designer, which is, I mean, you need to pace yourself.
So this goes back to the designing and the back and forth of their players are figuring out your game faster than ever,
Yep. Yeah.
and trying to keep up with the Joneses is an impossible task where you're also trying to move forward with the content.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. But I mean, I
interesting.
think there are various different kind of approaches both from a studio level and from a design level when it comes to design. And I mean, I always try to push that, like, your design is only ever gonna be the last reincarnation of it. Once it's in your head, that's the only place it lives. If you put it on paper, it's no longer what was in your head, it's what's on paper. Which is why I tend not put things on paper, because once you put it in the game, it's what's in the game. It's not what you thought you were gonna build. It's like, because that's gonna change. It's a moving target. You're gonna find stuff. You're gonna realize that you were stupid on some things, and you're gonna find new things that are way better than you thought about. And as soon as it hits the community and the players, the way they play the game, that's the game now. It's like there's no, oh my god, you're playing it wrong because you're not playing it the way we played it at the studio, or the way I played it the first time I built it, or the way I thought about it. You have to update yourself and just take the blows to your ego and realize, okay, this is what's enjoyable with the game. And I think that goes back to the whole discussion about like mobility and dodge and 1.5 updates. It goes back to, is it Cataclysm and speedrunning that's fun, or is it veteran, like, oh my god, we're walking together, pushing hordes as we go? You need to take all of that in and try to find a balance, because, I mean, we have such a wide palette, from recruit early players to like the guys who are in the progression part of it to the mastery crew, and those are very different things, and it should be fun across the board. It's just going to be fun in different ways, and that's really tricky to get right and super complicated. And one of the things I really love about this job, because you get to solve stuff like that, right?
So speaking of speeding and rushing, a little bit, and it's coming up on 2 hours soon, and I don't think I can keep you longer than that if I'm ever going to get you to come talk with me again.
No, I should probably get going soon.
So let me just cap it with this one. So speeding is an interesting way of playing the game. The
Sure.
mechanics, like you were talking about with objective-oriented play, it
Yep.
turns out it just works,
Yep.
right? It turns out it just works, with the problem being that it doesn't interact well with the pacing system.
Yep.
The combat system it works great with for the most part,
Yep.
especially in
Yep.
V1.
Yep.
So the escape scenes at the end of events, I'm thinking end of Drakenfels, for example, right
Yep.
now, work beautifully. An enemy below, work beautifully. Everyone has fond memories of running through that before you knew what the hell you were doing, right? Have
Yep.
This is just Mats talking, guys. This is not Fat Shark talking, just Mats talking.
No, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trying to preface this so you can just spiel a little bit here. Have you had big picture thoughts about how to incorporate more rushing scenes in an organic way in the pacing system? Because right now, you either know how to run the whole map, and the correct
Yep.
answer is to run the whole map, or you don't know how to run it all, and the answer
Yep.
is clear, move a little bit, clear, move a little bit. There's not
Yep.
like you rush a little part in this phase and then under pressure, but then you
Yep.
clear. There's not like that escape scene built into the basic progression through a map.
No,
Have
no,
you?
no, it's not. It's not. But I think it's the duality of deving stuff like this, because we haven't kind of outspoken. We don't want the main meta to be kite rushing. Like when we talk about the gestalts earlier, we have different types of playstyles, and we have the duelist and we have the kite rusher, which is stuff that we don't want to be mainstay things. Where people pick up this game, I'm going to start it from the get-go, and I'm going to go to Reddit and go like, oh, so you're just supposed to run it and not fight, because then people aren't playing the game.
Right.
So we have that, like where we have a vision-based thing where we need to do stuff to prohibit that, both from a let's spawn more gutter runners on you if you're rushing, or just make stuff. We don't we actively try to demotivate people from doing that by making stuff harder. However, there's the other part of it that goes, but people think this is fun, right? So if we spawn a bunch of gutter runners on people and we spawn a bit of extra hordes and we make stuff that's a bit harder, like people who are really into the higher end of the mastery and into speedrunning, they're going to be kind of happy with that because it's going to demotivate the noobs, but it's going to motivate the speed runners in a way. But it's kind of a secret ninja thing because we're doing rush prevention that's supposed to stop people from rushing. But if you're really good at the game, you're gonna get a nice little challenge that actually plays into that you're rushing. Uh, so you get kind of schizophrenic when working on stuff like that. At the end of the day, the stuff you're talking about, I think, lies beyond the dedicated scope of what we've poured resources into building. Like we're talking about the fringes of the experience where we have a lot of people that are like a speedrunner isn't something that we incorporate into the core audience. It's something that I try to build to enable.
But pause on that.
Kind of.
So
Yeah.
I'm not talking about full speed running. I'm
No, no.
talking about that the fact that Vermintide plays beautifully when you
Yep.
have almost no choice but to get to A to B fast
Yep.
under
Yep.
pressure. And
Yep.
there's only one map I can think of where that was incorporated in the middle of the map, and that was in the very last expansion. It was like Forest or something. Do you
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
the middle event scene where there's that kind of town thing where the spawns are intense and the only way to shut them off is to rush through it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So
that
yeah, we
was
definitely talked about stuff like that. It goes into the whole speed running thing because we like yeah, we're not talking about proper speed running, but we're talking about the principle of it, which is basically I don't want to like gauge the threat and find out a game plan and try to kill stuff. I just want to get past them. I want to get
yes,
like kiting a bit. So
good. We're
we
on the
have
same
this
page.
schizophrenic approach where it's like that is something that we don't in general want people to do, at least not as a solution for any situation, but it's still something that from an event perspective, I mean, I refer to it as push. It's basically we need to have a switch for players that tell them it's not important to kill things now. It's important to move the whole team over there and you need to employ
Escape.
other. You need to get to point B. It's one of the things that I think there's huge potential to improve because yet again it's one of those event things where we go let's try to do a thing, we just put an objective marker and then as you say it just kind of clicks, it just kind of works because we built the core mechanics in such a way that there is some leeway in that regard. Like there are definitely in my mind when we worked on it and now there's stuff that you can do to improve on that to make it both from an interface point of view a clearer thing for players because a lot like one of the things we noticed early on like casting Dragonfels, like there's a tendency to well there's a horde, I'm gonna find a choke point and just stand there and kill stuff and then people die, which we're super worried about because unless you have the buy-in from the player and send from the team, like you're never gonna get people to feel like it's a success, it's just gonna be wrong from the get-go. But I mean it also comes down to enemy behaviors where there are tweaks and changes that you can do that takes it away from the slot based kind of where's the line towards more of a if we're moving, if we're running, how does moving attacks, how does running attacks work, how do we mutate or change like follow behaviors for enemies, how do we prioritize AI updating for certain enemies so we're not running away and running into a bunch of guys standing idling because they're later on the update track because we have so many enemies spawn, stuff like that can definitely be improved. Yeah, I'm kind of into rambling mode at this
Yeah, well,
point.
it's too late. But if I can summarize, I think what I'm hearing is that there are a lot of technical challenges
Yep.
that come with making movement more of a movement under pressure,
Yep.
pushing more of a
Yep.
core part of the experience.
Yep.
And of course, there's a player signaling problem, like a Magic the Gathering keyword kind of problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Definitely.
so
And I
it'd
think
be a lot to get there.
yeah. Um, Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's a design. I mean, it's a whenever you're working with AI and complex systems. I mean, we have quite a lot of them when it comes to just getting the melee to work, and it's based around a lot of we're slowing you down. We have quite a low slow speed to begin with. There's a reason why attacks slow you down when you're charging them and stuff. It's basically to create this thing where positioning is quite relative. We don't use discrete positioning to the extent where you dodge out of things as much when just moving around. We want you to use distinct actions for that, like pushing, blocking, dodging. So changing that into a you're now running and being chased or trying to push through. There's a lot of development and a lot of nitty-gritty details that needs to be solved to make that a super clean thing. It's more of a case where we try it out and it kind of works, but you know, it's a time and resource thing.
Hacky a little bit. Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. This was fun. It's a trip down memory lane. It's like Vermintide 1. What did we do for Vermintide 1? Because to me, it's all a blur. I mean, it's yeah.
It was very cool to hear about the things that we've been experiencing as players for years to get a little bit of perspective from your side. But I will say the most challenging part of this all was not talking V2 and Darktide. Just saying. I'm sure for you too. So again, really appreciate your time. And also, again, I'm sure they've gone to sleep or to their own kids at this point. But if Xan and Ishgar are still here, thank you so much for putting this together.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
I've got nothing else for you, sir.
Good. Bye-bye in that case.
Have a nice night.
Cool.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.